By 1830, British India was producing over 1,500 tons of opium annually, almost all of it destined for China. That's enough to fill a small ship every single month, year after year. But here's the real question. How did one family manage to control so much of this trade and get away with it? It wasn't just luck or even ruthless ambition, though there was plenty of that. The East India Company had the British Crown's blessing, turning a blind eye as long as the profits kept flowing. And the family at the heart of it? They had connections in all the right places, from the docks of Calcutta to the counting houses of London. They knew how to grease the wheels, how to make sure the right officials looked the other way. But even with all that power, you'd think someone would have stopped them. So why didn't they? Because by the time anyone realized just how deep the rot went, it was already too late. The opium was in the bloodstream of an empire, and the family pulling the strings had become untouchable. By the early 1800s, the British East India Company wasn't just a trading outfit, it was an empire within an empire. With its own army, its own laws, and a grip on half the world's trade, it ruled over millions, from the tea fields of Bengal to the spice markets of the Malabar coast. The company's reach was vast, its power unchecked, and its hunger for profit insatiable. But power that sprawls so wide often grows thin in places. The company's officers, fat on wealth and distant from London's oversight, ran their domains like petty kings. They squeezed the land dry, taxed the people into the ground, and turned a blind eye to corruption if the right palms were greased. It was a system built to be gamed, and those with the nerve to play the game could carve out fortunes of their own. This was the world the Sassoon family stepped into, a world where the rules were bent for those who knew how to bend them. And the Sassoons? They were about to learn just how far ambition could take them. David Sassoon stepped off the ship in Calcutta with the confidence of a man who already knew the lay of the land. The air was thick with the scent of spices and the hum of a city pulsing with opportunity. He wasn't just another merchant looking to make his fortune. He had connections, the kind that opened doors before he even knocked. His family ties stretched back to the East India Company, and his name carried weight in the right circles. But it wasn't just who he knew that set him apart. David understood the rhythms of the trade, the ebb and flow of supply and demand. He'd studied the markets, the routes, the whispers of where the real money was being made. And timing, that was his sharpest tool. The British Empire was hungry for opium, and China's appetite was insatiable. He arrived just as the trade was heating up, positioning himself at the perfect intersection of need and greed. Within months, he wasn't just a player in the game, he was shaping it. His knowledge of local networks, his ability to navigate both British and Indian power structures, and his knack for being in the right place at the right time made him indispensable. The opium trade wasn't just about moving product. It was about moving it smarter, faster, and with fewer questions asked. And David Sassoon? He was the man who made it all look easy. By the early 1800s, Britain had developed an insatiable appetite for Chinese goods. Tea, silk, porcelain, you name it. The problem? China wasn't nearly as interested in British products. The trade imbalance was staggering, and silver was draining out of Britain's coffers at an alarming rate. Something had to be done. Enter the East India Company. They saw an opportunity in the poppy fields of Bengal. Opium, grown in India under British control, became the solution to their financial woes. It was a brutal kind of ingenuity. The British flooded China with the drug, turning addiction into a lucrative business. The demand was relentless, and the profits poured in, finally tilting the trade balance back in Britain's favor. But it wasn't just about money. It was about power. The opium trade became a weapon, a way to weaken China from within while filling British pockets. The consequences? Devastating. Addiction spread like wildfire, and Chinese society began to crumble under the weight of it all. Yet for Britain, the numbers spoke for themselves. Silver flowed back, and the empire's appetite was satisfied, at least for a time. The Sassoon family didn't just sell opium. They owned it, from seed to smoke. It started with the fields, vast stretches of poppies grown under their watch, tended by workers who knew better than to cross them. They didn't just grow the crop, they controlled the land, the water, even the roads leading out. No one moved a single gram without their say-so. Then came the processing. Hidden labs, tucked away where no one would look, turned raw poppy into the refined product. The Sassoons didn't trust outsiders with their secrets, so they trained their own chemists, loyal to the family above all else. Quality was everything. Cut too much, and you'd answer to them. Cut too little, and you'd still answer to them. But the real power was in the distribution. They had connections everywhere: ports, railways, even the local authorities. A shipment could leave their fields and reach the other side of the world without a single hand changing that wasn't theirs. They didn't just bribe officials. They made them part of the operation. If you wanted opium, you went through the Sassoons. If you tried to go around them, well, let's just say the family had a way of making problems disappear. And the money? It flowed back into their empire, buying more land, more labs, more influence. They didn't just dominate the trade.
Trump's
they were the trade.
155% tariff countdown
From the
is
dirt
underway.
to the dealer,
The United
Sassoons
States and
owned every
Australia
step,
are joining
and
forces
anyone
with a
who
2.
forgot that didn't last long. The British government wasn't about to let this slide. For years, they'd been shipping opium into China, despite the emperor's ban. The trade was too profitable, the demand too high. But when Lin Zexu, the emperor's no-nonsense official, seized over 1,000 tons of the stuff and burned it all in public, well, that was the last straw. London saw it as an attack on British commerce, an insult to the crown. The merchants in Canton were furious, demanding action. So Parliament debated, the papers raged, and in the end the decision was made: war. Not over land or freedom, but over opium, over money. Over pride. The Royal Navy set sail, guns loaded, flags flying. They weren't just going to punish China, they were going to force it open. Trade on their terms or else. And just like that, the First Opium War began, a conflict that would change everything. The Treaty of Nanking, signed in 1842, marked the end of the First Opium War between China and Britain. After years of conflict, China was forced to accept terms that heavily favored the British. The treaty required China to pay a massive indemnity of 21 million silver dollars to Britain, a staggering sum that crippled the Chinese economy. On top of that, China had to hand over Hong Kong to British control, giving Britain a strategic foothold in the region. But the financial burden wasn't the only blow. The treaty also forced China to open 5 key ports: Canton, Amoy, Fuzhou, Ningbo, and Shanghai, to British trade. This wasn't just about commerce. It was about power. For the first time, foreign merchants could operate freely in these ports, bypassing the strict regulations China had long enforced. The British also gained the right to set their own tariffs, further weakening China's control over its own trade. The consequences were far-reaching. The treaty exposed China's military and economic weaknesses, setting the stage for more foreign interference. Other Western powers, seeing Britain's success, soon demanded similar concessions, leading to more unequal treaties. China's sovereignty was eroded, and its people suffered under the weight of foreign domination. The Treaty of Nanking wasn't just a defeat. It was the beginning of a long, painful era of foreign exploitation that would shape China's history for decades to come. The Sassoon family didn't just build a fortune, they built an empire. By the mid-1800s, their name was whispered in every major port from Calcutta to Canton, synonymous with power, influence, and above all, wealth. Their merchant fleet, a sprawling armada of sleek clippers and sturdy brigs, cut through the waves like knives, carrying more than just silk and spices. Opium was their gold mine, packed in crates stamped with their insignia, flowing into China despite the emperor's bans. The profits? Unimaginable. Warehouses overflowed with silver, chests of it stacked high enough to make a man dizzy. Their ships didn't just sail, they ruled the seas, and the Sassoons didn't just trade, they dictated terms. Governors bowed, rivals crumbled, and fortunes were made or broken on their word. For a time, the world bent to their will, and the Sassoon name was carved into history with the weight of their riches. The Sassoon family didn't just build wealth, they built trust. And they did it one brick at a time, starting with the first public library in the city. When others were hoarding their fortunes, the Sassoons were writing checks to charities that fed the hungry and housed the homeless. They didn't just donate, They made sure their names were on the plaques, but not in a flashy way. It was always about the cause, never the credit. Then came the schools. The Sassoon Academy for the Arts, the Sassoon Science and Technology Institute. Places where kids who couldn't afford a decent education suddenly had a shot. The hospitals followed, with wings named after them, where doctors could work miracles without worrying about funding. They didn't just throw money at problems, they built institutions that lasted. People started to see the Sassoons differently. They weren't just rich.
This is what's called the Fight for 15.
When the
This
city
was a
needed
campaign
something,
launched
the
by
Sassoons
some
were the first
fast
to
food
step
workers
up.
in New
And
York.
that's how you turn money into respect. Not by buying it, but by giving
Imagine
it
a
away.
tiny tribe
The Sassoon
rising
Empire
from the
had stood for
shadows,
decades,
transforming into one of the most powerful empires in
सदियों तक इस्लामी दुनिया की शान और ताकत रही सल्तनत उस्मानिया.
This will create a kind of virtuous circle where higher wages will stimulate the economy.
Tonight, charges have been unsealed in a massive pharmaceutical drug bust worth $1.3 billion.
It was a the very foundations that had propped up the Sassoon name. It was a familiar story, really. A company rises, fueled by state support and the suffering of the masses.
The drums and bugles signal the moment the record crowd of
with hospitals.
Long before a single European ship touched the Atlantic shores, this vast land was alive with nations.
Known at the time as the Great War, or the War to End All Wars, World War I was the first global...
And it wouldn't be the last. Power built on poison can't last forever. The people wake up, the state turns, and just like that, another empire crumbles into dust. The opioid crisis isn't just a modern tragedy, it's a story that's been unfolding for centuries. Back in the 1800s,
hi, I'm John Green, and this is Crash Course European History, and things are indeed on course to crash.
And non-addictive. Doctors handed out laudanum like candy, and before anyone realized the cost, entire communities were hooked. Fast forward to the late 1990s, and history repeated itself. Pharmaceutical companies pushed opioids as the answer to pain, assuring everyone the risks were low. We know how that turned out. Now we're seeing the same patterns with synthetic opioids like fentanyl, flooding streets and claiming lives at an alarming rate. The difference? This time the crisis is moving faster, hitting harder, and leaving fewer survivors in its wake. It's not just about addiction. It's about greed, misinformation, and a system that's slow to learn from its mistakes. The faces change, the drugs get stronger, but the story stays the same. And until we break the cycle, history will keep writing the same sad chapter over and over again.